Hello, class. This is transcription, your first context, the history of writing. What you see in the background there are petroglyphs. Those are writings that are on rock and the earliest form of documented human communication. Of course, we all know that people, talk to each other and whatnot, but this is when they started in the Paleolithic time to actually make marks that meant things. And you can see a lot of these have to do with animals. There's an owl. There's several goats or possibly antelopes, a sort of a person figure, and maybe some other things as well. So we are going to start off talking about writing. And so the essential questions that we're going to ask is, what is writing? Where did it begin? What did the earliest writing look like? How did that turn into letters and words? And how does writing evolve over time? So in the image, you are looking at one of the very first examples of actual what they consider to be writing, where things are symbolic and not always drawn all the way out. And it was a tag. Think of it like a price tag. And it was for the sale of goats. And there were 25 female goats sold and 5 male goats. And the symbol of the cross and the circle stands for goat. The circle symbols are females, and they go all around. They're on the sides, they go all around, and there's 25. And then these are the 5 male goats. And because there's a fish here, that was showing that somebody who was noble was the person was buying these goats. Yep. And obviously this number is the asset tag for the museum. So what is writing? It's visual representation of language. It includes all types of visual communication, pictures, text, which is letters and words, or symbols, colors, and we tend to think of writing as just words, but it really includes all still visual communication. So we're not talking about video, except for if there's writing in the video, we're thinking closed caption, or the way that people sometimes impose text upon a video. Like if you're watching TikTok and they have the music playing as the sound background, but then there's words up there that, add to it. So if you look at the side here, you have several examples of writing. There are early forms where you can see that you have a symbol that meant one thing, in this case tree and wood. So there's one of them, and you can see it looks kind of like a broccoli tree. You have roots, you have the trunk, branches, and the things, and then that evolved into this, which evolved into the modern character. If I have 2 trees, 2 of these, that becomes woods. And then if I have 3 many, that becomes forest. If I lose the top part, where the leaves are, and I just have the tree and the roots, it means root. And you can kind of look down and see how all of those things kind of work together. Where you have a drawing that turns into a symbol, that turns into a written character. At the top right, there is graffiti, which is a visual symbolic language. It often contains letters, tags, names, words, and you can see here that there are some of them in various places, but the way they're written and their visual appeal is part of their meaning. So the colors that they're written in, the style that they're written in, that all adds to the language. And then below, decorative writing, calligraphy, where, as we know it, English letters and words are combined. It can be a little bit tricky to read sometimes, because what it says is creativity is the way I share my soul with the world. But some of these, like if you don't notice this line on way, it looks like hay, and This looks like foul instead of an S. So sometimes it can be a little tricky. This is the word symbolism that is written out using common symbols. And if you want to, you can study it for a while and kind of see how many of these symbols you know. There are things that you definitely know, like the speaker, it's a camera, there's the handicap symbol, on button, old school telephone, okay, recycle, telephone handle, 3-prong plug, etc. Okay, where did writing begin? So the oldest known piece of writing was found not too long ago, and it's a hashtag type mark. It's 73,000 years old, which is older than me, and it was written in red pigment on a rock and found in South Africa. And it can be kind of hard to tell what's a hashtag mark, but it's like there's lines, and there's the horizontal lines, and here's like another one. So hashtags are the oldest thing. So what early writing looked like, the earliest communication, a lot of them were cave paintings, and they were created because humans would dwell in caves. They wouldn't set up house in a cave and stay there all year long, but as they were nomadic and following the herds and things, they would move from cave to cave. So the drawings on the wall were made with pigment, and the pigment came up out of usually a grease mixed with clay to get browns and those kind of colors, burnt wood, charcoal to get the blacks, and blood mixed into it to get some of the reddish colors, and also to help it stick. And they also mixed it with eggs to help it stick, kind of an early tempera paint. And while we don't know, of course, because we can't go back and talk to them, but by studying these, they recorded what types of animals were in the area, the migration patterns of herds. There were symbols found that stood for landforms at the time, like mountains, rivers, fields, certain kinds of ceremonies. And they started out as just being pictures, like this one. There's a rhinoceros. And that's a pretty decent drawing of a rhinoceros. But then they started adding symbols to it that would mean different things. So here at the top left, the one with the hands, that's the earliest example of spray paint. And hands are thought to be an identifier. Here I am, this is my tribe, I'm a member here. And it's spray paint because of how they painted them. You know how if you take a straw and get water up in it and then lift it up, you can blow it and the water will shoot out. Well, they would take a hollow reed and put it in the paint and then put their hand on the wall like a stencil and blow the paint, and it would shoot out around their hand, leaving that kind of handprint. Below that, you see a slide of a migration procession, it's thought, where you have different people that look like they're carrying objects. You can see their legs, and this looks like, I don't know, some sort of box or something. And here's a hunter with a bow and arrow, and here's a large kind of ostrich-like bird. There's more people up here doing different things. This looks like it's probably a dog. But it was documenting where they were going, who was going, what they were doing. And on the right, you have one of the hunting petroglyphs that show a herd of elk and hunters with bows and arrows. And then the mighty hunter, which could be a person, it could be a leader, it could be a representation of one of their gods. We don't know. But do notice it has a wolf head. And it's holding a spear. Everybody else has bows and arrows, but this one is larger. It definitely has that animal head, and it's definitely holding a spear and not an arrow. You have the bull elk here with the horns, and then the females, some of which have the arrows in them, and then there are some babies as well. So once we get away from those kind of writing, the next written text that was actual text made up of letters was found in Mesopotamia, which is Iraq today. And just like we saw in one of the early slides here, where the picture kind of becomes a symbol, and the symbol became replaced by the symbol for the sound that was made when you say the word. So that was kind of a big jump. So this dates back to 3500 to 3000 BC. And this is what became cuneiform, the first formal written language. And this rock was the first novel, or the first piece of literature. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a long narrative poem. That's in this picture. This is in 1400 BC. You have probably read the Epic of Gilgamesh in English class. If you haven't done it yet, you probably will at some point. Or it's also produced a lot in comic books and things like that, either as its own story or as the storyline that's played out by other characters. It's one of the classic hero stories. So how pictorial writing became letters and words. It starts off with those realistic images that stand for people, animals, and objects. Like here we have the cow. And then the realistic turns into symbols. So the pictures are simplified. So you draw something that everybody knows is a cow without you having to do all of this detail work. And then those symbols for things gradually become replaced for symbols for sounds. Okay? And then the symbols for sounds become letters and numbers. In this case, this picture becomes C-O-W, pronounced cow. And that's that combination of letters and sounds that becomes the word. And then you combine words to create meaning. How now, brown cow? You see here's this lovely, lovely bull with a much larger, looks more like a bison type bull up here. And then in the background, you have one of the early horses and some elks and whatnot. So let's look at the cow kind of thing and how this works. And let's look down here where it shows how it evolved from Egyptians and hieroglyphics, where the cow, instead of drawing the whole cow, they focused on the head of the cow, which the most important parts are the horns, the ears, and the head itself. And then that was further simplified to just the oval or triangular shape. That was for the head, and then the horns. In this case, in Sinai, it was curved horns. In Phoenician alphabet, the bar on that was extended over to make the little ears, and then the straight lines came up and became horns. So this is the same as this. It's just turned the opposite way. And then in Greece, they decided they just kind of need the slanted and one horn. And that was kind of extended in Roman, and that gives us our letter A. And if you look on the side here, you can see how other things kind of became the hand to the upright hand to the on the side where it's simplified, and then to the letter K. At the bottom with the head that turns into the P, you have the Egyptian, the full profile head, simplified to just kind of a head shape with hair on top. It kind of looks like one of the Simpsons characters to me. And that became to pointy head on a stick, like Pyramid Head from Silent Hill. And that became into the P. Eyes with the round part became into an O. So pictures turned into symbols, turned into letters, turned into characters. And this evolution is found worldwide. It's pretty much how people think about things. We start off, if we want to communicate something, by doing it as realistic as possible, and then abstract it as we go. So if we just kind of look at fish, this first word here, Mesopotamia, you start out this fish, you can see it has the upper fin, the tail, and the two dorsal fins, and then it becomes simplified, and then it just becomes the mark that still has kind of that general motion and extension. Egypt looks like a fish. Okay, kind of the fish-shaped body, upper fin, bottom fin, tail, and then abstracted. China, fish, the kind of the fish shape, and then it crosses over to make the head and the fins, and then that turns into the Chinese letter. So take a minute and study these and kind of see how they adapt across and how that symbol kind of informs and is the basis for the letter. So some examples of early writing around the world, because people don't always realize that writing kind of happened everywhere in the world. It wasn't just in Egypt and the Middle East that it was developed. It began independently in 3 different parts. In Mesopotamia, which is the Middle East, so think Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Saudi Arabia area, all those areas. China, and Mesoamerica, which is Central America and Mexico. These are Mayan glyphs, and I can't say it right, Mexico. And they are complicated symbols that are pictorial, and you can see some of them, like we'll take this one here. When you study it close enough, you can see it's somebody in profile. There's an eye, slopes down, here's a nose, ear, kind of headdress, okay? And then they evolved into letters and writing. This is the Rosetta Stone. It's one of the most important rocks in the world, and it was how we learned how to translate Egyptian language, because on the stone it was a stone giving you laws and information about King Ptolemy. Each side had a different language on it. One side was written in Egyptian classical hieroglyphics. That was so that the nobles and priests could read it. That was their language. One side was written in Demotic, which is the informal language of the people. And then one is in ancient Greek, the current rulers of the area. So the people that found the stone, they knew ancient Greek. And from ancient Greek, they could figure out the Demotic. And from the Demotic, they could translate the hieroglyphs. And that opened up the whole key to understanding early languages. This is Zhiguan, which is early Chinese writing. It was found on oracle bones, which are bones that they would toss in order to tell fortunes. And Chinese writing was a little different, because rather than Mesopotamian writing where you took the pictures and they became sounds, Asian writing is the characters are ideas. They are complex objects and ideas. So instead of having to write out a string of letters in order to write cow, for example, they might have one symbol that says cow. And when that symbol is next to something else, another symbol, it would be, like if you had the symbol for death and you looked at it's like dead cow. Okay, the cow's dead. But they did that in 2 symbols rather than having to write out that string of the cow is dead as a sentence. Mesoamerica, this was found really recently. It is the oldest Olmec writing. It was found in some debris when they were building a road, and it dates from 1000 BC. It's hard to see the writing on the rock. You can see if you look carefully, and here it is kind of drawn out, and it does relate to later writing, but this is the oldest, and they know that there was probably writing before this as well in Mesoamerica. Again, that's Mexico and Central America. So how writing evolves over time. It changed from pictures to sound symbols and then back to pictures again, which is what it's kind of in the process of slightly doing now. And then the process of writing itself has changed too, because it went by hand, whether you were writing on a cave wall or writing on paper of some sort, to being able to be produced by a printing press and mechanical means, to now where it's produced by computers. Over on the right here, this is from the 1700s, and you can see a guy signing his name with a smiley face. And that's important because we're going to use that as an example of how this smiley emoji evolved. All the way back in 1700 BCE in Turkey, the oldest smiley face that we know about that was intentional is on this jug. And you can see it here, 2 eyes and a mouth that was glazed onto there with the head-shaped jug. So you have smile, which is the word. And then when you were communicating online, if you had, and offline too, because people would do it when they write letters and informal things. If you had asterisks around the word smile, that asterisk meant that you were doing it. So it meant I am smiling. So if you were writing a text to somebody back when computers and internet was first invented, and you put asterisk smiles, asterisk, it meant I'm smiling. This is a joke. And then in 1982, in Carnegie Mellon, somebody introduced the ASCII smiley, which is the colon and the parentheses. This guy here, actually they had a nose in it at first, but that is still used a lot. And then Unicode developed the coding to be able to create the smiley face, and there were 2 of them. There was the white smiley face and the black smiley face. And then in the year 2000, so 21 years ago, a Japanese programmer invented the colored emojis on Japanese smartphones, like the little smiley here. If you look at it closely, you can tell that it's pixelated because things were still not smooth. They were still kind of, didn't have a great resolution, and you could still see the pixels at that point. So your assignment for today is you're going to play with writing in hieroglyphics. And these are very simplified hieroglyphics. All right. But you're going to need your Chromebook, some traditional drawing materials. There is the hieroglyphic translator that's linked to Classroom to write your name. And you write your first name. You can write your last name. You can do all of your name. It's up to you how much of your name you do. This is my first and last name. And you type it just like a typewriter. Okay, so Rebekah was my first name, and that's right here, and then there's my last name. After you have that up, look at it and draw it. I want you to draw it out, and then photograph it and upload. All right, that's it.